Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Thank you, Chairman King, for giving me the opportunity to talk about the Chinese perspective. I will talk about 5 different points, okay, 5 points only. The first point is that China is a victim in this trade war. All right, China is part of the global economy, is part of the global supply chain. If you look at the rise of China, it's very different from what you have with the rise of Japan. In the case of Japan, you see head-to-head competition between Japan and the United States. Because, you know, you have Toyota competing against GM, say for example, right? You have Toshiba competing against GE. But China is part of the global supply chain, all right? So it's actually helping American firms to lower down its cost of production. So just to give you some statistics, 40% of China's exports to the world are actually conducted by foreign multinationals. It's the foreign multinationals who actually go to China to have low-cost production. They use China as export platform to the rest of the world, including the United States. 60% of China's trade surplus with the United States is actually captured by the foreign multinationals. So this is basically, you know, China is part of the global supply chain, all right? So that's my first point. My second point is that we try to figure out what Trump really wants to have. You know, Andrew just talked about it. To me, it's not about trade. It's not really about trade deficit. You talk about the decoupling, right? So my belief is that what Trump really wants is to want the investment back, okay? So it's not that China wants to be self-sufficient. It's the American who wants to be self-sufficient, all right? So look at what Mike Pence actually said. He said, we actually rebuild China. So we, meaning we Americans, actually rebuild China. So this is basically what I think Donald Trump actually has in mind. Mike Pence actually just said in his speech at Hudson Institute. We rebuilt China over the last 25 years. Now, so I think the objective of Trump is actually to get investment back, get the manufacturing back. The question is how likely it will actually take place. Okay, so my personal view is that it's going to be very hard. Okay, it's going to be very hard because why? Because, you know, because of the cost of production in the U.S. is way too high, right? It's the choice by the Americans. It's the choice by American firms. They decide to go to China to produce, right? So we all know that Trump actually has introduced a number of policies to attract investment back. Say, for example, get rid of the Paris Agreement. So you can do whatever in terms of energy, right? Lower down the corporate tax rate. So please come back, right? But the question is really, can you actually have sufficient number of engineers in the U.S. to make all these iPhones? I think that's actually really questionable, all right? So now here I think this is the ideal point to comment on the points made by the early speakers. You know, I agree with the early speakers that there's not much major change since the midterm election, but there is one major change, okay? If you compare Democrats with the Republicans, Democrats could be more anti-trade than Republicans. But there is a key difference between Republicans and Democrats. Democrats like redistribution. Okay, so actually, if you look at the process, the rise of China, or the U.S.-China trade dispute, is all about U.S. multinationals not paying its own deal. Okay, the American firms have benefited immensely through this process. It is the American firms' turn to contribute to retraining, to everything. All right, so you will see the possibility of tax increase in the U.S., or at least, you know, you won't have any further tax reduction in the United States, all right? And that's actually a huge difference, okay? So the direction of the discussion will be changing. It will be less about U.S.-China trade. It will be more about why the American firms are not paying its share in retraining the American workers. Okay? Now, my third point is really about how things will play out. Okay, so 2019 is a very special year in China. Okay, I can tell you it's the 100th anniversaries of the May 4th event. Okay, if you know what really happened 1919, you will actually know that the Chinese government will not back down. All right, it's the 30th anniversary of 1989 Tiananmen Square incident. Okay, it's the 70th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China. So 2019, if you want anything, if you want China to back down in 2019, the answer is no, absolutely no. All right. So, but 2020 is the year when you will have the American election. So you don't expect anything major to take place in 2020 either. Now, so the trade war will actually last for another 2 years at least. But what will be the impact of the trade war? Okay, so I actually study anti-dumping investigations a lot. Now, Trump's policy, the tariff war, you just talk about 25% tariff increase. That's nothing compared with anti-dumping duties. Anti-dumping duties is about 98%. Okay, so just look at the closest thing to trade war is the impact of anti-dumping investigations on the Chinese firms. I've studied the U.S. anti-dumping investigation against China, the European Union's anti-dumping investigation against China. Here are the three major findings. Okay, so the impact on the Chinese is going to be negative. So some of the Chinese exporters, they will vanish, they will exit. All right, so this is why you will see a slowdown of the Chinese economy. But the surviving exporters in China, they will do even better than before. Okay, so the message is that the anti-dumping investigation or the trade war will make the Chinese firms even stronger. So it's only the stronger ones that can survive, right? So that's the first point. The second point is that protection, trade war or trade protection, will only make the American firms weaker. This is basically based on studies done by the American scholars. Trade protection will make the stronger American firms weaker and will help some of the weaker American firms. So American firms as a whole will become weaker, all right? And the last point is that any tariff introduced by Trump on Chinese products, it will actually hurt the American consumers. It will hurt the American importers, those producers who use Chinese intermediate goods in its production. So the implication is that there might be inflation possibility in the United States. All right. So the trade war will take a toll on China, and so what would be the China's counter strategy? Okay, this is my fourth point. I think China will do a number of things. Okay, China will actually hold multinationals even closer by having robust domestic demand. So if the China market itself is very robust, China as a market, if China as a market is very significant, okay, you will expect to see loose monetary policy. You will expect to see expansionist policy. That is, the government in China will spend more money to boost up the economy. You will see preferential tax policies, and you will see government subsidies to foreign multinationals. The best example is Tesla, right? Tesla actually took the advantage of moving into China. So China will actually try to attract even more multinationals. So if you look at the statistics in this year, 2018, the direct investment has been decreasing for the whole world. But China, the investment going to China actually has increased. All right. The second thing China will do actually is to undertake supply side reform so as to reduce its cost of production, so that China will still be a very attractive place for low-cost production. So things like, reducing the layers of bureaucracy, et cetera, and et cetera. And on the export market, China will try to develop market that is alternative to the American. So in the whole world, there's not just only the American market. So the Belt and Road Initiative, the African market. So China will try to get into some of the other markets. Okay. Now, even if you talk about the American market, I think the Chinese will take really proactive approach in relocating its manufacturing outside of China into some of those countries that are closer to the United States and using those countries as platform for exporting to the US. So these are the possible strategies by the Chinese. What are the strategies for the Korean firms? Okay, I think I have two suggestions. Number one, if you believe China as a market, okay, if you think China as a market, if you think Chinese market is significant, which I believe so, then this is the best time for you to go to China to build relations with the Chinese government. Okay, the Chinese government will remember you, all right? So in times of crisis, if you go to China and say, I'd like to invest in your country, you will get all kinds of subsidies and preferential tax policies. So look to Tesla, okay? Now, if you use China as a low-cost production base, you might actually have to diversify your sourcing strategy a little bit. But it is very hard because you really have to do coordination with many of your upstream suppliers and downstream consumers. So it's not going to be a trivial matter for you to simply relocate from China, by yourself to a third country. So this is why I think you might actually adopt a strategy which is called China Plus. So China will still be your sourcing place, but then you might want to have an alternative sourcing country. And plus, you might actually go with the Chinese to the interior parts of China where the cost of production is so much lower, or you might actually go with the Chinese to some of those Belt and Road countries where the cost of production is lower. So these are the main points I have, and I hope that I haven't used the time. So leaving some of the time for my friend, Professor Yu. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much.